and welcome for all of you who are tuned in. You're watching TMH and this is our English Daily News. As we move on to our headlines for today, Ethiopia's Abiy Ahmed boxes himself in the talks within the South African country. The US and UAE discussed the immediate need for a cessation of hostilities in northern Ethiopia, and drone strikes in Ethiopia's Oromia kills multiple civilians. As we move on to our main updates for today, Ethiopia's Abiy Ahmed, under diplomatic pressure, bogged down in the war front in Tigray, has once again boxed himself in the peace talks in South Africa. Abiy's earlier footing dragging the calls for peace talks intended to give Ethiopia time to capture key cities in Tigray and a force in Tigray's surrender. Despite the pro-war propaganda, the battleground isn't in Ethiopia or Eritrea's favor, particularly in these past few days. Observers say while this shift is resulting in an immense human suffering, Tigray is essentially encircling those attempting to encircle them. According to observers of the talks being held under wraps, the Ethiopian government boxed itself into a legitimate process, in a large part due to the Uhuru Kenyatta and Lambo Guka pact by the U.S. as well. The African Union has announced that the United States, the United Nations, and the Intergovernmental Authority are participating in observers of the ongoing peace talks between the federal government and the Tigrayan forces taking place in Pretoria, South Africa. While the AU is nominally running the show, the U.S. is quarterbacking, and over the past few weeks, enormous pressure has been placed on Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed Ali, particularly by the United States, to agree to an immediate cessation of hostilities. And as the Ethiopian Tigray talks enter the third day in South Africa, the delegations are expected to share preliminary proposals for an immediate cessation of hostilities, hopefully to happen by Sunday this week. A cessation would ensure a stop in the fighting, a return to defensive postures, and a free flow of complete humanitarian aid and medical supplies. Social entrepreneur Samuel Gabru wrote on his Twitter account, "There's still an imbalance in authority. While Tigray has sent a senior decision maker led by Getachew Reda, and Ethiopia's delegation continues to tell mediators they can't act without consulting their superiors, like Demak Amakonnen, as the lead Ethiopian negotiator is still absent." He also added that Abiy Ahmed is running out of diplomatic and military runway as well. The U.S. and UAE have discussed the immediate need for a cessation of hostilities in northern Ethiopia. According to a statement attributable to the spokesperson Ned Price, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken spoke yesterday with UAE President Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, and the Secretary and President stressed the immediate need to end the war on Tigray. In related news, German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock also wrote on her official Twitter account that millions of people in northern Ethiopia are longing for peace and an immediate ceasefire. She called on the warring parties to negotiate in good faith and finally bring about peace. Journalists are highlighting the plight of the Tigrayan people in the war that is being conducted in complete darkness. Tadala Lama, who's a journalist and CEO of Jakin Publishing, told VOA Straight Talk Africa that fears of renewed mass atrocities in Tigray are very much well-founded. Let's take a listen.
Currently, we have the Ethiopian army together with its allies from Eritrea and also from the neighboring Amhara regional state, taking control of cities and towns in Tigray, inside Tigray regional state. And the concerns are coming from the experiences of the first round of occupation and also intervention by the Eritrean forces and the Ethiopian army of Tigray. For about 10 months in darkness. What has happened remains to be seen until today, but from the little that we know is a complete pogrom. So the concerns are based on a couple of those experiences, number one, and number two is the experience of dehumanizing language in the Ethiopian political space. If you have seen the statements released by the U.S. Holocaust Museum Center yesterday, mentions about the possibilities of atrocities because of that. presence of dehumanizing language against the Tigrayans that runs all the way through the political system, the government media, and also individuals and all this. So concern is growing as to the repeat of the first round of atrocities that we have seen. To refer to Secretary Blinken, an ethnic cleansing happened in the Western Tigray, and also verified and corroborated information about a massive scale of sexual violence, including sexual slavery against Tigrayan women. So these concerns are well-founded.
Lead editor of VOA's News Center, Salim Salamon, on her part, emphasized the government's monopoly of narrative as standing in the way of reporting the reality of actually what's happening on ground. Let's take a listen.
In Ethiopia, there's a lack of media literacy because if you report on a certain issue, you have to take a side in the eyes of what they perceive what journalism should be doing. And that's a problem. Those who parrot government propaganda are said or seen as having the interest of Ethiopia, as opposed to, even if you speak to the TPLF sometimes, criminalization. You spoke to what the parliament designated as terrorist group. And so it was very, very contentious to report it. But there's also a government-imposed blackout, as you saw in the satellite. The little information that we get, we have stringers in Tigray, for instance, for us filing, using little satellite connection that they can get, filing us stories of airstrikes. This is the government using drones on its own people. Okay, so we've reported several reports about civilian casualties. We're talking about children being victimized, IDPs, internally displaced people who were displaced from previous, hostility, now being victims. So this is the nature in which that we're reporting on. Very difficult.
You're watching TMH's English Daily News, and we'll be back after this short break.
Situation in Tigray today is unacceptable. And has to change.
Do you envision peacekeepers?
At this point, we have two other challenges that go to the security piece. One is we have, as you know, forces from Eritrea that are there, and we have forces from an adjoining region, Amara, that are there. They need to come out, and a force that will not abuse the human rights of the people of Tigray or commit acts of ethnic cleansing, which we've seen in Western Tigray, that has to stop.
The world focuses on Ukraine, but 500,000 people have died in Tigray. I commend you for your visit to Ukraine. I hope that we pay, if not equal, at least more attention to Tigray. The Ethiopian and Eritrean governments are using starvation as a weapon. And the World Food Program says that 90% of the people there need assistance.
There's been a gruesome war underway in Ethiopia for a couple of years now. It's again in progress as we speak. Tens of thousands of women have been raped by militiamen, many of them intentionally infected with AIDS. Can it get worse than that?
For me, particularly the news of the violence against the women is incredible and something that probably not has happened in any wars or conflict in that region. Maybe a word about what is the aim of Ethiopia. When I met the Ethiopian leadership in February, they really used this kind of language that they are going to destroy the Tigrayans, they are going to wipe out the Tigrayans for 100 years and so forth, which for me referred to very serious human rights atrocities and crimes as well. If you wipe out your national minority, what is it? You cannot destroy all the people, you cannot destroy all the population in Tigray, and I think that's very obvious that we have to react and because it looks for us like an ethnic cleansing.
Welcome back, and as we continue our English news for today, our update continues as the peace talks continue in South Africa. The civilians in Ethiopia are still under a complete plight of the ongoing conflict. Drone strikes in Ethiopia has killed Oromian civilians, and witnesses tell the Associated Press that the drone strikes in Ethiopia's Oromia region killed several dozen civilians last week. The attacks and strongholds of Oromia Liberation Army came amid intensified fighting between federal forces and their armed group. I lost 3 of my brothers in a drone attack on Wednesday on the 19th of October, said a witness who spoke on conditions of anonymity on the fear of his safety. According to the witness, the attack happened around 12 p.m. in the Meta Welqait area. The witness added that his brothers were killed along with 20 others as they tried to carry to health centers people injured by an earlier drone strike. My brother was all of a student. We buried their mutilated bodies, as the witness alluded to. The opposition, Oromo Federalist Congress, one of Ethiopia's largest political parties, confirmed these attacks on a statement that was issued on Tuesday. The irresponsible drone attack on Sunday killed 7 and 10-year-old children, mothers, the elderly, and even displaced people. The statement from the party also added that the government is busy using drones and fighter jets against civilians and is trying to hide these civilian killings against ethnic Oromos from the public eye. The Oromo Liberation Army said on Tuesday that the government used drones and other airborne assets to indiscriminately massacre civilians in the Meta, Nunukumba, Wama Hagalu, and Kobe areas of western and central Oromia regions over the past few days. The OLA asserted a death toll in hundreds and said schools and civilians gathering were also targeted. The spokesperson for Oromo Liberation Army, Oda Taribi, said on the October 24th post that his Twitter account and that there have been 6 drone strikes within the region since October 20th, and added that over 150 civilians were also killed in Meta Welqait and Kobe area districts of West Shawa Zone. As we move on to our final update for today, Tigray Action Committee, co-founded by 2 sisters, Ma'abel and Hausen Gabramedin, who migrated from a refugee camp in Sudan, are steadily becoming a force to be reckoned with here in the diaspora. Involved in everything from meeting with legislators and government officials to raising capital through their foundation and providing humanitarian supplies for these affected of ongoing genocide. Speaking to Forbes, the Gabramedin sisters elaborated on why the international community and the United States specifically need to pay closer attention to the escalation of this conflict in an article titled "The Forgotten War: Why 2 Sisters Created an Organization to Push for Change." When asked about the impact of the lack of media coverage the Tigray war has garnered compared to the coverage on the Ukraine conflict, Ma'abel responded by explaining how this issue does not solely fall on the hands of the Tigrayan diaspora. This is actually very much an American issue, she says. There are Americans that are trapped in Tigray, American citizens like our father. The United States is the #1 aid provider to Ethiopia, and they have tried to give aid to Ethiopia, and almost right under $1 billion worth of aid has gone to Ethiopia, and that is the American taxpayers' dollar who are paying for it. But what is aid? The aid is currently just sitting on trucks and rotting and is expiring because the Ethiopian government refuses to give it to those in need. Instead, they'll just let it sit and be a part of this ongoing blockage and complete blackout. That concludes our news for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Bye-bye.